Well, our guest is Brian House. Brian is on YouTube, and he's most well known for his grinder videos. He has developed and sells plans for a kind of a DIY 2x72 grinder called Revolution Grinder, and it's really neat. He has sort of taken this complicated and expensive tool and broken it down to where it's a project that a person can either build just from the set of plans, or you can buy his kit, which has a lot of the pre-cut out parts. These grinders are really, really neat. They're super versatile. Now, they're most well known among blacksmiths and knife makers because you can get really precision grinding, and there's a million different wheels and shapes that it'll grind. But they do a lot more things than just steel, which we'll talk about. Now, I got to apologize. Halfway through this conversation, I'm a little sick, and halfway through, I just got attacked with this coughing fit, and I'm just a wreck. I tried to turn my mic off, so for those of you listening or watching on YouTube, I apologize. And we're lucky to have my dad in this conversation. He, of course, loves everything about this topic: tools, craftsmanship, people creating things out of nothing. Brian is really artistic, and if you've ever seen his videos, you'll know I'm not kidding. They are absolutely beautiful, and he's really good, and I can't wait for you to enjoy this conversation. And afterwards, go watch the videos to give it all a little context. Without any further ado, Brian House.
So Brian, what is that on the bench right in front of your mouse hand there? That looks like an anvil with a rounded heel. What is that?
It is. It's a small 60-pound Atlas knife anvil. It's a United States made anvil, and believe it or not, they make them themselves. It's forged, and I think it's cast. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not. Forged, but I use it here on my bench mostly for leather work, setting rivets, things like that. It's small, light, and handy. It's really made for knife making, but I love it. It's a great piece.
So did it come with all those edges fullered like that, or did you grind those edges? Did you fuller all those edges? Did it come rounded like that?
It came fullered. Yeah, just as you see it. Yeah, he makes them like this. He polishes them up, and believe it or not, they ship these in a flat rate United States postal box. So
wow,
you gotta love that.
Smart.
Right?
Gotta love that, man.
Yeah, it keeps the price low. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, those flat rate deals that the post office puts out, man, they really, I bet you see some heavy. That's about as heavy as they get. But I know we utilize that for our ribbon burners, and man, they're not getting a very good deal on us.
Yeah. I ship about each one of my grinder packages there's 2 of them, and they're 40 pounds a piece. And we ship so many now. The post office knows us. When we roll up, we ship twice a week. So they, I like my tagline is always, you got to work for it, right? And the post office definitely works for it when they see all my gear come through. So,
they're working on your stuff. That's awesome.
Yes, indeed, for sure.
You're saying this guy is making these like right now today and shipping them, manufacturing this anvil, kind of like yourself and your 2x72, which we'll talk about. But there's small anvil makers as well.
Yeah, Atlas Knife and Tool. If you can look them up online, their website's fantastic. When you're out shopping for an anvil, as most people know, to try to find a vintage anvil now, the cost is insane. And if you're just looking into getting into the hobby of, say, knife making, you have a few options. You can go to Amazon now, eBay. And Atlas Knife and Tool. There's a few sort of boutique anvil makers, and I got sucked into the whole anvil making thing, and looked into it to see if I could actually do it, which I don't think I could ever actually do it. I'd love to make one, but when these guys do it so well, and by the way, this little tiny anvil at 60 some pounds, 65 pounds. It will do what a lot of larger anvils will do, especially if you're making knives, because you don't really need the horn. A lot of knife makers don't use the horn. I use it sometimes, and I do have an anvil that has a horn on it. But This, for me, for all its purposes, it's a perfect little anvil. And I think the cost was really inexpensive. I can't exactly remember. It was like a couple $100 for this, but
Whoa.
and shipped to your house. So yeah,
Wow.
nice
So
little.
Brian, pull that back just a little bit so we can see the profile on it. We're just looking at what ought to be the bench back to the Hardy.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. Wow.
And it comes
Yeah.
with a hot cut, so you can actually hot cut right on it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're in business.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's a perfect little anvil. You can move it around by hand, and it's got a nice sound to it, nice ring to it when you hit it. Lots of bounce back. Yeah, it's a great little piece.
That is awesome. Heck, I mean, if $200 is even close to it, a guy could put one of those on the floor for an upsetting block. You know, it would be worth having on the ground just for upsetting the ends of bars. You know, that's pretty nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very versatile little piece. And I just actually got back from Blade Show in Atlanta, and they were there. Atlas Knife and Tool was there. Great crew of people. You know, really key. You know, they're American made. You know, that's one of the things you don't really find anymore. You know, is a lot of people actually making things in the U.S. now, and to be able to go to somebody's website and buy a small anvil and have them ship it to you with their name stamped into it, it's just a good feeling. You know, it's good to see people making stuff with their hands. So
it's kind of funny. We pay attention to all this pretty closely, and it's amazing how many things just like this. And to be honest, your 2x72 that until a couple months ago had no idea was happening and out there. And there's probably, dozens more little boutique anvils just like that, man, it is a small world. And at the same time, there's a lot going on that we don't all know about, even in this tiny little niche we're all paying attention to.
Yeah, that's the beauty, I think, of YouTube, is that YouTube inspired me to get into something I've always wanted to get into. So back in college, 20 some years ago, I studied sculpture, and I was really wanting to kind of focus on the arts, and and then of course you start to realize that, if you want to make a decent living for yourself doing creative endeavors it's really difficult. I wanted to have a family, wanted to be successful, wanted to have nice things. So I got into the tech business. I was good at it. So, I started building computers. I went to work for Fox Television and did a lot of creative work, but also a lot of technical work. That's where I picked up a lot of, I'm working with a lot of these old timer electricians and guys who just, like, no, don't throw that away. We're going to pull that off and we're going to fix it. Taught me how to use an oscilloscope, taught me how to solder, things like that. Very valuable skills. And then, of course, on the back burner, always I had a garage shop where I would always be pulling my tools out, working, creating, or fixing. And in the back of my mind, I always knew that I wanted to do something with my hands. I wanted to be tactile, but I was always sucked into the tech stuff because that's where the money was. 15 years ago, I started a small computer repair shop, and that was great. And still running today, and taught me how to run a business. That was the key here. Hire some people, incorporate, money manage, customer manage, things like that. Taught me really great basis of business. In the back of my head, I always kept thinking, I want to still migrate away from that and do something different. And I had some really positive people in my life that were business savvy, who encouraged me to hire somebody to run that business while I started another. And my business plan wasn't really drawn out to the point where I'd like it to be, but I just dove in with both feet, especially with the support of my family. My wife is amazing. She was the one that was just like, go do it, make your dreams happen. She believed in me. And that was just, it just changed how I saw everything. So I stepped away from that business and let somebody else run it, and started what you see now, which is my YouTube channel, which is housework. We're still small, compared to a lot of other channels. But I'm only about a year and a half in, like 2 years in, really, at 40,000 subscribers. We're doing pretty good. By the way, I would like to congratulate both of you on reaching 1 million subscribers on the Essential Craftsman.
Well, thanks for that, channel. Man. But I'll just tell you that we are both so we're just a little shell shocked right now at the effort that we've both been outlaying, and we've kind of let this milestone just kind of go by. We'll stop and talk about it at Christmas time, but thanks for that vote, man. It's nice to hear anyway.
One of the things I think I love about you guys both so much is that you're the classic definition of getting it done. You know, if and I'm sure you've had lots of conversations back and forth in the comment section about people who would love to slow your process down with things that may or may not be important. And I too have, had those same things. And I think to myself, when I watch your channel, I see a lot of yes, you could do it this way, but this is the way we chose to do it because we had to get it done. And that's the type of person I am as well. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really tough. Even the house that exists, and even in the videos, as you know, like there's 100 ways to explain it in a video. So we're deciding some of these things multiple times, and for most of them, there's no really obvious right or wrong answer. It's kind of like, which way do you want to do it? It's like kind of torturous to have that many decisions to make sometimes, and that unless you're making a lot of videos, which we'll talk about with yours, but you would certainly understand that, like how deep do I need to go? And when you're looking back at it, you can always kind of see some comments and be like, okay, that went okay, that I could have done better on here, but you don't really know how that'll be received when you're cutting it and putting it out there at first. So I don't know, it's not as intuitive as people might think. I don't know if they think that, but it's not.
Yeah. And decision exhaustion is a real dynamic. After a while, you've made so many choices and you have so many choices looming that there's a part of your brain that just kind of shuts off. And it's like, I can't make one more choice today or maybe this week. It can be overwhelming. That's for sure.
I've been there. Yeah, I know what you mean by that. And also when you have a camera pointed at you, whether it be your son or just me, like I've been here by myself most days, but it almost is like that. You get that paralysis by analysis. You're like, if I show this, I know that the direction of this video is going to go in a completely different direction. People are going to focus on this stuff. So what I've learned to do, and I'm sure you have do the same because I've watched your evolution of time over time and watching your channel for so many years, is that you are now removing yourself from that process. You're basically saying, look, I'm going to do it the way I want to do it to make me happy. And that's going to be good enough. And I'm going to show the process and share my experience. And I think that's what the reason for your success is, that you're doing what you love doing and you're sharing all this great stuff. And it's like, you throw it up in the wind and hope something catches, and it's all good from there.
Yeah. The advantage we have that it sounds like you don't have is that I've got Nate who has his finger up in the wind, keeping track of which way this is blowing all the time. And he has a more detached perspective. And so that's just a really valuable, first set of eyes, really. In reality, mine becomes a second set of eyes on what's really going on. But you just said something about, with the camera, the exhaust. So I have kind of characterized it about that the zen of the work disappears as soon as the camera flips on. Are you with me on that? And maybe it's just in my own perfection. Maybe it's just in my own head. But man, when that camera goes on, the automatic aspect of doing your job suddenly gets compromised. I'm always drawn back to the fact that the camera is running rather than keeping my head into the job and what's happening in that moment. Does that happen for you, or can you forget the camera and just go to work?
Yeah, it's very difficult to forget the camera. I mean, I think from my perspective, I'm prototyping things in my shop here. And what I found, and I didn't know that this was even a thing, but people just really love to watch the process of the prototyping and how I'm thinking about designing something and getting into what I do with the 2x72 belt grinders and then the different attachments and the things that we've been creating over time. That's something that wasn't very native to me. In fact, I learned about 2x72 belt grinders on YouTube when I was looking to build my own. I built one, and then I had an accident with it because I was using it incorrectly, and I threw a knife into my apron, and
Nice.
it was okay. I was safe. I had a leather apron on. Everything was okay. I realized that, that tool was outside of my financial reach. Like, I couldn't afford a built tool. So I needed to build my own, but I wanted to have all the features, like going in reverse and horizontal tilting and all those things, so that I could use the tool safely. I actually took the time to learn CAD so that I could draw it up in CAD. And then that led me down this road of essentially just showing every step of the way. So I remember Christmas of 2018, I posted a video of me welding up just some parts and showing how the tilting mechanism worked. And I think on the first or second day, I got like 20 some thousand views. And my channel back then only had like maybe 10,000 subscribers. And I went, there's got to be something to this. Why are they watching? What is that? What is the fascination? And then when I started talking to people, I realized that I put myself in a position that a lot of other people were in. They couldn't afford that tool, and they wanted to watch me build one so they could do the same. Little did I know that would transform my life from, getting away from my tech business. And now I do pretty much this full time. This is all I do. And I'm making a living at doing it. And I did it in just inside of like a year and a half, which on YouTube is kind of tough, but
short time.
I'm proud of it. Yeah, I'm proud of it. But the other side of it is I tell people, like, look, if you're on YouTube and you want to get paid for ad revenue, that's kind of a long game situation. You really got to saddle up your YouTube channel with a business. And if you don't do that, you're going to be in a longer game of trying to generate ad revenue. And that's ad revenue, as you guys know, is just up and down all the time. You just never know. You can't rely on it. So I basically did that. And so now I'm finding myself getting a lot of people watching and showing. And then also now, of course, people are building my tools, which is an amazing feeling. Looking all over the world, thousands of times over, this tool has been built. It just blows my mind, guys. I'm just I don't even know, like you said about the 1 million subscribers. It's hard to even think of it in terms of reality.
How do you think? So your 2x72 is a good example, but there's probably people watching your videos and learning a ton and then making their own without your plans and kit. And so you're kind of creating all this value and giving that away. And I've met people who are afraid of doing that, but you are just kind of giving and putting it out there. The more detailed, the better. Can you talk about that? And I'm assuming it's working out counterintuitively in your favor doing it that way, but I know people who take a different approach. So why is it that you're just giving away all of that nitty gritty detail, even if someone may not buy your plans because of it?
That's a great question. I get that a lot, actually. People think that it is counterintuitive. I will say, I don't think so anymore anyway. I think that when you give it all away, the right people are more apt to become your customer. So if I felt like, and people have copied my design. I mean, it's a well-known fact. In fact, it's a bone of contention in a lot of these groups that I'm a part of. A large company actually copied my design pretty much to the T, but which I kind of took as like wow, I'm flattered by that. I think it's great. But the other piece of this puzzle is when people watch the detail, they can get a good sense of what I'm doing, and hopefully they'll spend money with me. And if they don't, hey, I can't stop that. But what I can do is I can share every little detail in hopes to inspire someone else to maybe create their own tool or their own machine. I talk a lot about this on my own podcast, where I tell people, like, look, if you're going to do any endeavor, anything at all, make sure you love it. Make sure you have a passion for it, because when that thing is kicking your butt and it's kicking it hard and you're failing, or the times are dark, you want that passion as sort of your motivator to keep going every day, to keep doing it. I absolutely 100% love mechanical engineering and designing industrial machines. I don't know where it came from. I'm fascinated with it. I find myself playing with these things, figuring it out, looking at the belts, figuring out the physics of how it turns and how we can make it better. How can we make it cheaper? How can we make it easier for the person to build? And I just I wake up every morning and think about that. There's been people out there that when they get into this business or they start looking at doing something similar, I call them, unless they're truly passionate about it, I call it a smash and grab. They'll basically replicate somebody else's design and then sell it in hopes to make some money. They're not doing it because they love it. They're not doing it because of any other reason other than financial gain. And as you both know, that's a lesson in futility, because eventually you're going to hate it. And eventually you're not going to want to support it anymore. You're not going to want to do it. And I think the reason for our success is that people see that energy in what we're doing, and they can just sense it. They can sense how much I love it. And ultimately that translates into sales, and it turns people from friends into customers and vice versa, you know?
So that's really, those I think are important thoughts. And getting back, you said you studied sculpture. Okay. So true confession, I find myself without any time in my life now to consume YouTube. I used to, Nate turned me on to YouTube 10 years ago, and I consumed African wildlife videos quite a bit for a while, and then just started discovering the educational component a little bit. And then our YouTube business started, and that was that. I mean, hasn't been any more time. So I was watching your how-to video on your 2x72, the Revolution, right? It's called the Revolution.
Yes.
And the thing that jumped out at me was, wow, that's a beautiful tool. That guy has an art sense. And then you go ahead and express the fact that you've had sculpture training and education. And your 2x72 is a piece of sculpture. And as I was looking at that, I was just the way the pillars, that are holding up the wheels and stuff, and the proportions. And steampunk is not the right word, but there's sculpture going on in that. And that's got to be part of the reason you love this so much, is because you're doing this mechanical engineering and dealing with the physics and making it work and making it for less money, and inputting these sculptural art elements that invite the passion, right? I mean, at some level, the engineering is interesting, but it's hard to get passionate about efficiency. Although guys do. And it's easier to get passionate about efficiency that brings some beauty with it. And so kudos on that. That's a fine looking machine. I especially love the way it rolls over to horizontal. Okay, that is a very, very classy look and an efficient process. So yeah, I like it.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, a lot of thought and energy went into the actual design, of it, because I've seen, I wanted it to feel industrial. This is a heavy machine. When it's complete, it's 90 pounds, which is pretty heavy
Wow.
for a grinder. And a lot of people have designed other grinders. There's a lot of 2x72s out there in the market that are all plate steel versions, and that seems to be the kind of the trend. However, with tube steel, there's a lot of I just love the look of it. Not only that, it's like monolithic, right? It's got this weight to it, and the balance of the machine. You can turn it with one finger and it'll stay horizontal or vertical without any locking mechanism at all, even though we include one. To me, if you're right. I love looking at the machine, and every iteration it gets a little bit sexier, kind of, for lack of a better term. But I appreciate you saying something about it, because I did spend a lot of time working on it.
Yeah, it's nice. It looks nice.
Dad, will you maybe explain, and then Brian, you take a swing at it afterwards. But I know there's a lot of guys listening who are enjoying this and be like, yeah, that is cool. I'm not a knife guy, so I don't need one of these. But I think that might be I think people might not realize how useful and versatile and helpful and sort of like problem solving these 2x72s are. And Dad, you've had a couple different ones, but maybe sort of make a case for why, even if you're not a blacksmith, if you can salvage a few square feet on your workbench, you might, need one.
Yeah, they are the magic tool. And it took me a while. Well, it took me precisely as long as it took me to meet Cy Swan and watch him use his 2x72 to realize the capacity. And then I was in Ken Jordan's shop, and he's got one in there because he was going to be a knife maker, but he ended up being a consummate woodworker. And so it's one of very few tools that is it's wood, and it's steel, and it's non-ferrous metals. You can particularly with those frequency drives, you can turn the speed down and sharpen drill bits on those things. They completely obviate grind stones. I mean, I grew up trying to grind things on rocks, spinning stones. And as soon as you introduce a 2x72 with the variety of belts that are available and the different wheel sizes and speeds and reversibility, it is nothing like the old electric grinder. Nothing like it at all. And almost anything I'm doing, I mean, even cutting the end off. If I've got to cut half an inch off the end of a bar, and I can get out the plasma cutter, or I can get out the cutting torch, or I can walk over to the cutoff wheel, or I can go to the bandsaw. Most of the time, I just go over to a 2x72 and wrap that thing up to 5,200 feet with a coarse wheel, and zzz, it's done. It's just from rough work to the finest work that you need to do in the shop. It covers every base.
I 100% agree. Once I built my first one and realized how much utility and how much time saving it made for me, even my rudimentary one, which didn't tilt and didn't go in reverse or anything, I realized that this was such an important tool that every workshop should have one, whether you're a metal worker or a woodworker or you're just a hobbyist. But they are out of reach, as far as cost goes, so that's why when we put the kit together, it was like, we got to keep this fairly affordable. And with steel prices going up, it's been very difficult to keep it, keep it low. We still, we're now in a different kind of space where I'm able to purchase a lot at one time. Whereas before I was buying, 10 at a time, and I was paying 10 at a time pricing. Now we buy 100, sometimes 200 at a time. To get better pricing, to keep our prices low. So we're doing all of those things. The other piece of this puzzle is that we have removed the major component of cost associated with these grinders, and that's the labor to put it together. We really want we want to empower them and show them, like, look, even if you've got $100 Harbor Freight stick welder, you can put this thing together. Even if you've never fabricated. I've watched people they've never welded a day in their life, put together the Revolution, and they got ownership over it. They're like, look what I built. And what that, not only does that make my heart feel like my life is complete, right? I've educated people, I've empowered them, I've shown them that hard work is important, that they can do whatever they want with their time. But now they're sharing their story on social media, which then in turn translates into sales for me, because they're like, where did you get that machine? And how'd you do it? And did you build? Oh, you got to talk to Brian House. He's the guy that you want to talk to. And all of these people are connected in some way. They've all got. I like to say that I've found my freaks. Everybody out there who does the same kind of stuff that we love to do. Right? Work with our hands, build things. Be part of the process of making things. Growing up, there wasn't a lot of those guys around me, but now I got this like crew of people that I can call at any time. And it's all because of this grinder project. It's changed my life.
I feel like you might have skipped a step, Brian, because you had your computer business and then you started into like the workbench world. But I watched the video of the knife you made, and it was immaculate. Like it was not a beginner knife. And so at what point did you become so proficient, and like, or had you sort of been doing these things nights and weekends your whole life anyways? But at what point did you really like get a hold of all this and be able to turn out like that kitchen knife, work at that level?
Yeah, I've been making knives for about 4 years now. And, but I've always been, working with my hands, and, I've did a lot of woodworking, so woodworking kind of translates into handle work and knife making.
Yep. Yeah. Work is work.
Work is work. Hands, working with your hands is that kind of stuff. But I'll say that there's never been a time in my life over than just like a small brief period where I didn't have a workshop, where I was always like, tinkering with something, making something. The reason why I love working with metal is that every piece of steel is different. And you have a chance to take that piece of steel, transform it into something. And not only does it become something beautiful, but it becomes a tool, like a knife. There's probably not a day that goes by that any of us in this room don't touch a knife, right? And I would say a majority of the people on earth, it's the same thing. Knife is a tool that is a universally accepted tool for a lot of things. And to be able to create one and do it in a way that it's not aesthetically pleasing, but it also has a lot of function, is difficult. But I love the process. I absolutely love the process. And I appreciate your kind words, Nate, on that. That knife was Which one was it? The Giotto that you
Yeah.
saw, the
Yeah.
last one? Yeah, that was part of the Giotto challenge that I got plugged into with a bunch of guys on YouTube. And by the way, that's the other beautiful part about YouTube is that I've connected now with all these amazing makers that think the same way, and they're doing amazing collaborative work.
Uh-huh.
Like this Giotto challenge. I'm in the same room with guys that have that I've idolized, for a long time, been able to watch their work on YouTube and just appreciate. Now I'm on a one-on-one basis with those guys, and I'm able to ask them questions and talk to them. So there's just it's a really cool connection point, and knife making for me. I don't really do a ton of it on YouTube anymore. And the reason is because, as you know, YouTube, you're kind of one of the lucky channels that gets to kind of pick and choose whatever they want to do. But, if I make knife making content, it doesn't tend to get a lot of attention. Although I will say the Giotto did get a lot of attention. So maybe that's going to change things up for me, perhaps. We'll see.
Yeah. Interesting. There is something about knives. I mean, they are seductive, right? So many people ache to make a knife, and I don't know, that's a DNA thing or something, or just like you said, everybody uses one every day. And so it sort of burrows into our subconscious as something that's worth doing. And we get all these ideas about how a knife could work and how it should look. And then people like you with an art sense come along and push the frontiers of how beautiful a knife could be out there a ways. And then we think about that, and that sort of baits the hook a little more effectively for us until we just can't. At some level, most guys just can barely stay away from trying to make a knife, and they're just kept away because they don't have the tools or the place, right?
Yeah, it takes a lot of tooling to make a knife, a proper knife. I have been blessed with being able to have access to tools like this. And the grinder project is the sole reason for that. The grinder project for me is able to finance everything that I want to do in here. And so it's kind of like a symbiosis. I'm able to create this grinder, support it, sell it, make money, and then do what I love doing. It's like a 50-50 kind of thing. And but then when you see, I see you guys working with bees and building houses, and you're doing all the things that I had done at one time at a part of my life. I see you all as like a renaissance, of men, that you're able to find all these passions and mix them all together. And one day you're, working with the bees and rescuing bees. And another day you're in your blacksmith shop using a power hammer. A lot of times those two things don't go together, but for some reason with you guys, man, they just do. I'm in that same camp, by the way. I love all that stuff. And I had a small apiary at one time. Bees are fascinating, and I love bees. So I love watching that video, by the way. You guys rescued those hives and everything.
My wife, you were talking about your wife. So the three of us are sitting here blessed with exceptional women. I can tell. I know Allie. I know Nate's bride. She's exceptional in so many ways. And I met Kelly when I was 15 years old on the school bus. And you were talking about your wife encouraging you to identify what you want to do and go for it. What chance do those guys have who don't have women like that in their lives? I just don't see how any of, this convergence. So we're talking about convergence here, but multiple dynamics in a person's life kind of converging at a certain time and changing directions. How would convergence even be possible without that partner who's there facilitating that and bringing her own set of skills and interests? I just wanted to kind of run down that little rabbit trail for a second and recognize that. It was great to hear you say that your wife encouraged you in this stuff.
All my best ideas come from her. She has, she has been the person who has said to me, I'll give you a really great example. So last year the company did well, and always at the end of the year we have to evaluate and look at our tax liability. And the thing is about businesses have to spend a little money at the end of the year because they want to offset. So if you want to grow your business and if you need a piece of gear, you should buy it towards the end of the year because it'll offset your tax liabilities. And I've always wanted one of these laser etchers, these high beam, fancy 50-watt things that'll etch steel, it'll etch wood, it'll cut leather, it'll do all this stuff. And they're expensive. They're like $5,000. And we had the money, but I was like, I couldn't do it. I was just like, look, it's a luxury device. I don't need it. Okay. I mean, I want it, but I don't need it. So I show it to her on my phone. I said, that's the one I want. And she goes, buy now. She just hits her finger right on the button. She goes, oh, yeah. Oh, your PayPal? Okay, sure. Boom. And I went, wait, what? And it was already done. She's like, you need to learn that this will push you further. This will slingshot you. Sure enough, I get the laser. Takes a couple months because they got to import it. But this thing, I create content with it. People watch it. They love lasers. Everybody's so fascinated by lasers. And now I've got a company who wants to partner with me, and they want me to kind of be an ambassador for their laser company. Of course. See, this is her idea. You know what I mean? It was like, she's the one that pushed me into it. She's the reason I'm in the studio right now, because she said this studio was going to be a rental space. So I own units in this building. They're like, you can purchase them like condos. I bought this space as a rental, as like in sort of a investment property. We're standing there talking one day, and she says, you've been talking about doing your YouTube thing. Why don't you just move in there, put all your tools in there, take them out of the garage, and I can park my car in the garage. And then you go there and you do your thing over there. And I went, really? You think so? And if I would have listened to her, we would have made about $12,000 a year in rent to rent this place. And, you do the math. I don't have to explain it to you, but that would have been a bad move financially. We've far exceeded that now. So all because she has been the one who has just kind of like pushed me over the edge, with those concepts and ideas.
And
so
does
Sarah
she
has
take
taken
consulting clients or anything? Would she be willing to coach me at all?
She would love to tell you how to spend your money. Yes, absolutely.
That's funny. It was when I was watching that kitchen knife, it was the moment the laser came out and etched those symbols on it that I was kind of like, okay, this is insane. This guy can do it all. So that laser really, it definitely paid for itself, I would say, or made an impact.
It definitely
continues to.
So in Kelly and my marriage, our analog story to that is historically. So I'm at the tail end of the baby boomer generation, right? So I am not tech savvy. Nate has had to compensate for that with this whole thing. It's like pushing a rock uphill for him to get me to be able to do this stuff. But right away, Kelly and I nailed down email, and we nailed down Craigslist pretty well. And so she would hear me talk about tools, and she'd start watching Craigslist. And she found for me the 125 CFM towable compressor that I needed to run my power hammer. Boom, she scored on that. She found the radial drill for me that I have in the shop that I needed. Boom, she said, here, look at this. You looking for a drill? Yeah, boom. Every once in a while she'll say, now what tools are you looking for right now? And she just surfs Craigslist. And so anyway, we're back to that same idea. That's
my kind of lady, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. You have to have that good partnership with somebody. Yeah. And, they'll change all of your trajectory will change if somebody's behind you saying, go do what you need to do.
That's right.
I fully believe that. Yeah.
Secret weapon. Well, about shop skills a little bit, because you talked about you'd been making knives for 4 years, which is not all that long, and people should click on that video or any of the other ones you've done to see the level you're at now. But isn't it amazing how it doesn't take necessarily decades to become pretty decent at something? And in a lot of times, after you do something once or even twice, you learn so much just by seeing it, you just kind of doing it that way, that the distance from zero to having no experience after you have just one or two, there's a lot of ground made. And I bring that up, and maybe you could talk about putting your 2x72 together, because when I watched the video, there was a lot of processes in there that I'm not real good at or haven't done a ton, but it occurred to me like, hey, if I put that thing together, I would probably become better at, tapping holes or welding or whatever it may be. So how buildable is the 2x72? What kind of shop skills does it take? Maybe kind of go through that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, you need a welder, you need a drill press, a tap set, which in the design of the Revolution, we use only 2 taps, 3/8 16, 1/4 20. There is a 1/2 inch 13 thread as well, just one small one. You're right about that. Is when buildability was really important. So if you've heard me say Gen 4, that's because we're on generation 4 of this grinder, and I've made small modifications that add up to big things. One, for instance, is the buildability overall. We took a lot of the math out of it for people. let the laser cutter basically do that work for them so that they don't have to think about it. And then the other piece of it is like the platen, the facing part, for the user facing part where, the hard platen is. We wanted to give people more space above for people doing work with, say, cleavers or lawnmower blades or whatever they might be working on. And so we dropped and we took the pivot point from the center of the platen, the D plate, and dropped it down 2 inches so that you got 2 more inches of platen space to where you could now work on a like bigger device or bigger project. Those little things, those are little small design changes. Also, just adding like tracking mechanisms and stuff. And my kit when it started, it basically was like the very first iteration was just, you got the bare bones pieces and you kind of had to find everything else. Now you get all of it except for the wheels, motor, and VFD. And you should be able to fabricate this in less than a day. Most people have about 5-6 hours in on it at the end if they're a proficient fabricator. If they're not, it might take them a weekend. A lot of people do it with like their son or their fathers or whatever, and they're building them together. Sometimes people build 2 or 3 of them. It's really kind of cool to watch. The thing is you just need to understand welding. And if you watch any of my videos, you'll see I use a MIG welder. It's just a middle of the road Hobart, American made, Hobart MIG welder 220. You can use stick. Stick is great. If you got it, use it. TIG, if you really want to get fancy with it, go TIG it up. It really, for my opinion though, like if you have a MIG welder, it's like kind of point and shoot, right? You can splat a weld on there and it'll stick. Same with stick for the most part, if you know what you're doing. But yeah, what I like about the project is it's not too intensive to the point where I feel like I'm asking people to do things that are outside of their comfort zone. Say, like when I built my original prototype, I didn't have a plasma table or a laser cutter. So I used like one of those round table. The name escapes me now, but on my mill, I need to be able to create radiuses, right? So
Yeah.
I had to be able to use
dividing head.
Yeah, I had to be able to learn how to do that because I had just never done that before. So, and to ask people to do that would be really tough, or to drill holes and then file out the C channels. I mean, that's crazy. When a laser cutter can do it in 10 seconds, let the laser cutter do the work, and we'll push the product out that way. Some people still build these by hand, by the way. I've seen a few of them like in South Africa, where they have real difficulty time finding laser cutters and things like that. People build them by hand. I've had people build them in Iraq, Afghanistan. They send me photos.
Wow.
I'm connecting with people all over the world that are doing this, and it's amazing.
Talk to me so it is amazing, the whole being in contact with people and having that, and having more than a superficial conversation with someone on another part of the planet from another culture is an amazing thing that Nate and I've been learning.
Yes.
A couple of tech questions, if I can find my note here. Okay, so you talked about the getting what you pay for in the frequency drive, that the one requires a cool environment and dust-free and the other is more robust. It also has a knob for the speed control. So my 2x72, which I love, it was a game changer for me. I just love it so much. It has a button control, speed control. And I'm thinking of taking that thing off and putting a knob on there just for the time it saves to be able to make that speed adjustment in 1.5 seconds instead of waiting for the speed to come up. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely a knob. I mean, I'm a knob guy all around because of what you said. It's just a much more efficient way of tuning the speed. There's 2 different routes you can take when you go into VFDs. There's the cheap ones that you can get imported. They're $100. And these are for the guys who are just like hobbyists. They're not like, and I tell people, like, look, if you buy that, just be aware that it has a lifespan. You can buy a KB Electronics K-back, which is like what the industry standard is. If you've ever watched anybody like on TV using a grinder like that, you'll see K-back makes a button version too, a digital version, which I'm not a huge fan of. But that one is about $400. So you're talking, quite a difference in money there. However, I will say I'm running both. So just because when I tell people, like, look, you can go this way or this way, I want to have the experience firsthand so that I can, sell whatever I'm selling. I want to know is going to be, I have that knowledge.
Yep.
My cheaper $99 VFD is still hanging out with my $400 VFDs, and it's not popped yet. But one of the main reasons is I keep it really clean. I'm always blowing it clean with compressed air and making sure that it's clean. Now you can encapsulate those in boxes. People do this all the time. They take the original box off the outside. They put the electronics into, like, say, a sealed box, and they put the controller on the outside. And some of these guys are running those for 10 years, just like that. So you can go either way, but I love a knob, Scott. I'm telling you, that's the way.
Yeah, it's just right now, up and
so
down. Yeah.
What does it take for someone if they're listening to this and be like, I think I want to try it? It still costs something. So kind of give us the big picture on what it takes and what people need to find themselves and all how it goes down.
Sure. So when you buy the kit, we call it the ultimate bundle. It's all the steel parts, everything from the plate steel to the tube steel. You can build the frame and everything from that point. You have to obviously fabricate a few things, drill and tap. That kit right now is $535, and that's shipped to you. So if you're in the U.S. And you get 2 big boxes filled with steel for $535, and then the other components you'll have to source are the motor and the VFD, and also the wheel set. We don't have the facility yet to make the aluminum roller bearings. We're working on that. We'll probably have something, but there is a gentleman in Utah who makes them. His work is fantastic, and so basically you're going to pay $150 for his wheels, and you're going to have probably about $300 into the powertrain. So at the end of the day, most people have $900 or less dollars, depending on how creative they get with this device once they're done building it. If you look at a manufactured 2x72 grinder that does all the things that the Revolution will do, tilts, goes in forward and reverse, has all the work rest features that has 45 and all of that, you're going to be in the $2,000 range, most likely. So we're doing it for about half or less than half of the middle of the road grinders. And in my opinion, what you get with the Revolution is that much more it's just, in my opinion, it's like it's an industrial heavy machine that can contend, with the big boys. And it does, we see them out there. And I went to Blade Show and I was wandering around, and, I can't cover my face up. People know who I am. So if I wander into a grinder booth, they're all looking at me kind of sideways, like, why are you in here? And it's like, there's kind of that line where you want to be respectful and stuff, but I love talking about grinders, and I wanted to talk about their grinder with them. And some guys were really receptive and some were not. So it was really kind of cool to see my influence in that world, even with guys that have been doing it for 10 plus years. So. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting to see personalities sort of demonstrate whether they are willing to bet on the value of giving things away in terms of information and sharing, or not willing to make themselves vulnerable and bet on that and want to be proprietary and keep their cards. I'm not making a judgment call here. It's just interesting that some people tend in one direction and some people tend in another. And anyway, it is interesting. Now, Nate and I went down to a YouTube get together in Texas 3 years ago, Good of the Land Festival, I think it was called. We had a fine time. There was a grinder down there. I don't remember the manufacturer, but I remember that there was some mechanism that operated inside the circumference of the belt, right? I mean, inside the space that 72-inch belt created, there was a release so you could spin it around, and so the platen would present, and then you could pull a pin and spin it around and the contact wheel would present inside the profile of the belt. I thought, now that is a handy innovation. Have you got any thoughts like that on your mind? Or maybe you don't want to tip your mitt, but it seemed to me to be a time-saving, worthwhile innovation.
Yeah, no, you're right. It absolutely the tri wheel is,
yes.
There's a bunch of guys that are doing that now. It might have been Ameribraid that had that. Those guys are doing that. Also, the team down in Australia that sells through Alex Steele, the 84 engineering guys in Australia, they have a similar setup. And you're absolutely right. I want to prototype something like that. I definitely do.
Right.
The the thing about it is that mechanism, that axle that the
Yes.
platen rides on, would have to be machined. So
Yes.
what that does is, if I were to do that, it would mean that we would have to have those parts machined. So the cost would go, up quite a bit.
Mhm.
So for now, what I have is just a swap out, my arm with an arm that has a contact wheel on it. But you're right about that. I mean, the being able to flop that over and just now you're doing, hollow grinds and everything. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, you're right.
Pretty nice.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
well,
It's beautiful.
that is too
Beautiful
cool.
design.
And the project aspect itself is like just so cool and
Yep.
exciting about yours. It's like for most people, I would assume, listening, this is as much a hobby and like something to do as anything else. And so doing it itself is like part of like the satisfaction of owning it. I don't know how many big, fabricating shops you have like buying your plans because they need to replace the one that broke. In other words, building it sounds so fun, and putting it together and forever having your 2x72 be assembled yourself. If something breaks, being able to know right away, like, well, I built you once, so I can build you again. That whole component of the tool is really cool. Oh, and then the other thing that you're doing, aside from prototyping this tool, but I was really impressed and amazed, building out the website. And I guess now that I know you have a computer background, it makes more sense. But
And art.
yeah, and art, but it's not that easy. We've sold a few things online. It's not easy. It's hard, you're answering questions and emails and shipping, and it is not
Yeah.
easy. And at least from your website, it looks just really solid and well done. And I got to assume it's you got a army of happy customers at this point. So what was that like, putting all that side of it together? The grinder's only half the battle for you in this.
Yeah, the marketing of it is sort of organic now, but you're right. When people go to your website, we get a tremendous amount of traffic because my grinder videos now, 500,000 views, 250,000 views on some of them. The amount of traffic that feeds back from those videos is amazing. But yeah, we lean on Shopify for our back end, and here's the reason why. Is because I don't have a team of people that I can like defer to any of this stuff. And they include all these like great little apps. Like for instance, here's a great one. They just implemented something called Shopify Ping, which puts that little thing up at the bottom of the screen that says chat with us. And if you're a customer and you click on that chat and you send a message, you type it in, it comes to me in a little app on my phone and it pops up like a text message. And if I respond to that, it pops up on their device as a text message. And so now I'm able to convert people into sales much quicker now because, as you know, most people won't dig around. They won't read everything. They would rather type out a question, which is human nature. It's just the path of least resistance. So if I can offer, say, a quick response within minutes or say an hour, that builds trust between my customer and myself because, they're going to go down this road, right? They're going to buy all this stuff and it's going to be, $900 or whatever. And now they're going to be building it. They want to know that when they're in the middle of something, if something goes wrong, they can gain access to me.
Yeah.
And that little piece of that functionality Shopify builds in, there's just no fee for that. It's just like a part of their software. So yeah, that like the website. Also, my wife is she's a UI and designer for a fintech company, so I lean on her quite a bit too for stuff like that. She takes all my photography, does all my pictures and everything. She's amazing. She's an amazing artist as well. So it's that's kind of that. She handles most of that stuff. But yeah. The customer response stuff, I handle all that myself.
Yeah, we've had our ribbon burner is the closest thing that we've done, and it's a much simpler deal, But that being said, Dad, you've got emails and people following up like, what should I do about this? And when you have a customer with this type of a thing, they're with you for a while, and for you, it's that in spades. I'm sure. Like when someone starts building in their mind, you're like in their back pocket the whole time almost, it's like you're on the journey with them at that point.
Yeah, you would think so. The plans are really detailed. There's 62 pages and also the the walkthrough videos If you've seen some of those, I'm
Yeah.
sure, but like the Gen 4 build video is like an hour 45.
Yeah.
And then, I timestamp everything. So when somebody has a question for me, I say, make sure you go click through. Here's the timestamp, and I'll send them the link. And 9 times out of 10, I never hear from them again because that video explained everything they needed to know. There's something about being able to convey how to build a machine and then tune it, make it run right to thousands of people in hundreds of countries, and try to convey that in a way where it's not driving me nuts. And surprisingly enough, it doesn't drive me nuts. I mean, I do get questions, and most of the questions are about, believe it or not, are about the wiring, which is, in my opinion, the simplest part. But people have a tendency to overthink it, so they want to confirm with me that the diagram is right. And, when you're wiring up a 3-phase motor, colors don't matter. 220, it's 2 hots and a ground. It's very simple. But in their head, they're like, well, all my wires are green. And I'm like, right, but they have T numbers on them. And those T numbers correspond. It's very simple. Once I break it down for them, it gives them the confidence to move forward. And there's nothing like the look on someone's face when they hit a button and a wheel starts turning, and they were the ones responsible to it, right? And
That's true.
They feel like they're so empowered. It's such a beautiful thing to watch. And then, of course, now they're putting the wheels on it, and they're putting a belt on it, and they're like, it's tracking. It runs forward and reverse. Think about all the things I'm going to be able to make with this. It just becomes, it gives me goosebumps still to this day. I love it. I absolutely love that.
And part of the value is what we talked about, 30 minutes ago about the versatile nature and sort of the utility of a 2x72. These people have wanted one. They've saved their money. They've gone through the drill of researching it, and they've bought yours, and they've built it. And they aren't just putting the wheels on. Their hands are shaking while they're putting those wheels on. They're just so excited to finally have that tool in their shop. And so when that, like you said, when that wheel starts to turn and that belt starts to track, and it dawns on them that they're in business, man, that's something they will always remember. And then to be part of that, that's pretty awesome.
So I know we mentioned that
definitely
it
a
takes a lot of
culture.
tools. Oh, I'm sorry. It takes a lot of tools to make knives and everything. But Brian, maybe it also can be simpler. And let's just assume that 2x72 to make a high quality knife is one of the must have tools. What else does a person need, thinking like bare bones, someone who has nothing? It doesn't have, they don't have to have the full toolkit you have. What do they need?
I definitely think a forge is really important. Even if it's a single burner forge and you want to start moving metal, that's like key. And yeah, you don't need a 2x72. A lot of guys do these with like the 4x36 or the 1x30s that Harbor Freight sells. Yeah, you'll be behind the 8 ball a little bit, but it'll kind of give you an idea as to like how simple the process can be. Some of my more rudimentary tools I go back to is a hammer. I mean, like a decent rounding hammer is nice. A crossbeam is nice. Again, not necessary. But if you're getting into, like, say, bar stock, creating knives using just simple bar stock, for instance, I still run my Harbor Freight Bauer, cost me $87 Portaband. I love that tool. It's a fantastic tool. I use it all the time. I use it every day. I used it today. I use it for a multitude of things. That can shape your knives and get you where you need to go, like primarily. And then you can even go with files. You can take everything down. And with a properly tuned forge, if you know halfway what you're doing as far as like heat treatment goes, you can pump out a knife with a couple $100 worth of stuff. I mean, it's really not that difficult anymore. The process, in my opinion, will be frustrating, though. The initial process of learning how to do knife making or even just moving metal as far as blacksmithing goes, the addition of these tools, like for me, I never use my propane forge anymore because I have an induction forge. I love my induction forge. I just think it's easier. I turn it on and I can heat things really quickly. That, again, is not normal. That's not a normal process for a blacksmith, but it makes the process for me that much more enjoyable. So it's like tolerable to me. Whereas running a propane forge is really difficult because I don't have like ventilation like most people do. I'm in an industrial building, so it's hard for me to get that kind of stuff. But yeah. I encourage anybody that wants to get into it to start watching like Simple Little Life. Jeremy over there, he's a friend of mine. He's got an amazing video sets of him doing knives with very rudimentary tools. That's a good channel to get caught up on if you're interested in that kind of stuff.
So this is closely tied to another life skill, which is just managing your expectations, right? So if you start into knife making with an elementary toolkit, expecting to make an entry level knife, you're going to have a great ride, and then controlling those expectations and with a reasonable expectation of improvement and additional complexity, But I'm with you 100% that it's a fantastic experience, unless you've set your sights so high that you're frustrated from the first time you realize how hard it is to actually move the metal with the hammer. It's
Yeah.
if you get that in line, you're going to have a wonderful time.
Yeah, and you also should look at it like you're learning something new every single time you work with a different kind of steel. For instance, like that Giotto, I used AEBL. There was 3 different versions of that knife before I actually figured out how to make the process work for me. So I had to make 3 different types of that knife to figure it out. I've been working with high carbon steel up until that point, and high carbon, you can get away with a lot. Whereas AEBL will not allow you to go too hot or too cold. It will crack. There's issues there. But when you're done with it, you've got this stain resistant knife now that looks like high carbon steel. And that was the thing I was wanting to go for. So the entire process of me learning how to do that, I probably burned 10 hours and didn't realize it. You got 10 hours invested in that, and you just go, wow, I learned something new today. And now I'm going to take that with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
That's
amen.
part of my journey as a craftsman is this, I've been blessed with given the time where I can actually now do these types of things. And I feel lucky. I feel blessed, and it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Yeah, we're used to seeing like our dads and grandpas and all these mentor types who can just fix anything and they know a little trick. And when you're younger, it's just you take it for granted. You kind of like, man, I wish that person. But that's how it happened. Just kind of over decades of trying new things and being in the right spot at the right time when they saw something happen. So assembling this grinder or building a few knives, even if a person doesn't become knife maker for life, who knows when those skills will just be of super of utility. Or like heat treating, for example, almost that alone, just kind of going through that enough times to sort of get it, man. There's probably very few people really understand what's going on, let alone how to do it.
That is so true. That is an arcane. That's something people can't imagine themselves knowing anything about. And yet, like you just said, after you do it a few times and it kind of clicks, you have at least a beginning understanding of it, which is way different than anybody else. So, just a couple things I just want to throw out. I loved your vinegar bath, your descaling vinegar bath. Love that. That stuff gets so nasty after it's been, it just gets and you think, well, this has got to be a toxic waste, but it's not. It's vinegar, right? It's vinegar. I just love that. I've got to gear up more effectively for that. The next thing is, if you ever want a ribbon burner, if you ever get the urge to build a big forge, if you ever need to build a big forge, let me know, man. I'll hook you up with a couple of ribbon burners. Would love to send them to you. And they are the propane forge solution, for a lot of reasons. So just file that away.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you have a need for it, but I'd love to send you guys the Revolution kit, and it would be awesome to see you guys build one together, and put one in your shop. I know it's an extra tool, but you have the space there. You could have an extra. It's always nice to have an extra grinder laying around. So if you're interested, let me know. I'll hook you guys up and send it to you, and then you guys can do the
we will
process.
definitely talk about that, Brian. That's a generous offer.
Yeah,
Thank you. And Nate needs a grinder in his shop, and so we could figure out some way. Yeah.
It'd be fun
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, almost like it'd be fun to let it, if we had one here at some point, even let it tour around, let Cy use it for a while. And Cy's he can make magic on probably any grinder under the sun, but it'd still be interesting to have his 2 cents on it. So,
yeah.
Well, Thanks for the offer, Brian. And we'll of course link to all these videos, but just in case someone's driving and they want to take a look at this, can you go through your website and YouTube channel one more time, and hopefully it'll lock in for them?
Sure. If you want to check out the grinders, my website is housemade.us, just like it sounds. And then on YouTube, I am Housework. So my last name is House. Actually, my last name is Housewort. It's been that way my whole life, but everybody calls me House. So we came up with Housework because I love to work. I believe in hard work. I think it's the true path to purpose. So you can find me there. You can find me on Instagram, house__work. And Facebook. We have a really awesome Facebook group called DIY Grinders and Machines. And it's just a bunch of guys like me and you talking about their experience building their own industrial grinders. And believe it or not, there's over 10,000 people in that group. And wow. We all chat and we're sharing concepts and sharing ideas. And this goes back to your original question about, how do you feel about sharing your intellectual property out with the world? I'm at the point where I feel like it's an important part of the process of moving us forward, and having people climb in and learn, even if it costs me money, which I don't believe it does. I think it makes me money, but even if it were to cost me money, I think the overall answer to, if I can inspire one person to go out and do this, it makes the difference and it changed the world. That person will go out and make something new or different, and that will slingshot the human race. And we'll just keep building on each other's ideas and concepts. I mean, chances are people can look at my grinder and replicate it anyway. So why not just give them the keys to the castle and see what happens?
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Half the time when I hear someone explain, give away for information, I come away going like, well, I don't want to have to reinvent that wheel, so I will hire them for whatever the thing. So it's almost like the more you hear someone explain all what's into it, it just locks in. Okay, I got other things to work on. So I think you're dead on. It's just smarter to be open and sharing and giving. And well, I love it. Well, hey, thanks so much, Brian, for coming on. We'll link to all these things. Keep it up. I'm sure we'll be in touch. And just love your video. Oh, I didn't mention, but yeah, highest praise on your videos, and everything about them is just beautiful, just like the rest of your stuff. So I hope you just keep doing your thing, and we'll be watching as often as we can. And anything to leave the listeners with, Dad, from your side there?
No, just amen. I love your mindset. I love the work you do. I love the videos you make. I love your art sense. I covet your art sense. Okay, I covet that sculpture education. It's so hard. I mean, that thin, blurry line between art and craft, right? I mean, it's so indistinct sometimes, but you can tell when you're well on one side of the line or the other, and it's just nice to. Anyhow, I covet that. But where are you located? Where are you doing your work? What part of the world are you in?
I live in the polar opposite of you guys. So I'm in South Florida. So I'm in very southwest corner of Florida in the state of, and in Naples is where my studio is. I was brought here to work, got hired from a small airline, hired me to be their tech guy. And then I moved here for that. And it's a great place to live. I love it here. There just isn't a lot of like-minded people. I mean, it's a retirement community here. It's a great place to raise kids, though. I have 3 children, and they're all, hopefully going to be contributing members of society, but we'll see. But great place. Great place.
Well, mine are contributing members of society, and it is life's greatest blessing. It's the greatest blessing. Well, if you ever get up to the Northwest, man, you come up I-5, you let us know, you stop in. We would love to show you this part of the planet. Okay.
There will definitely be a tour going on. We're actually toying around with the idea of taking a tour all around the U.S. and meeting with everybody that, these key people have built the grinder, and spend some time with them, and then do some YouTube content based around that. It'll probably be in another year or so, when things lighten up as far as the pandemic goes and everything, but we're thinking about doing that. So I've never been to Oregon, and I want to go there. So I just appreciate the offer. Thank you so much.
We'll look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Brian. We'll catch you next time.
Cheers, guys. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.